What facts take a minute to sink in? Story 1. Over the space of 3 days, an estimated 165 people survived both the Hiroshima and Nagasaki nuclear bomb attacks. Tsutomu Yamaguchi is one of the more famous ones, who was only 2 miles from ground zero when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. It hit when he was walking to work on the last day of a work trip. After he heard the drone of a plane, he looked up at it and the sky lit up. He was then plucked from the ground, spun around, and tossed into a nearby potato field. Miraculously, he survived despite being covered in burns, soaked in radiation, and with 2 blown eardrums. He spent a night in an air shelter, then took an overnight sleeper train home to Nagasaki to see his family. When he made it to a hospital in Nagasaki, he was so burned a childhood friend didn't recognize him. Neither did his family. Despite his wounds, he made it to work the next day. He started giving his boss a rundown on what happened, and his boss thought he was crazy. There was no way one bomb could destroy a city. Suddenly, a bright light lit up the room. He panicked and dropped to the floor of the office seconds before the shock waves smashed out the office windows. He had just been hit twice by a nuclear blast in the space of 3 days. At the age of 93, he was given the title of Nijyu Hibakusha, or Twice Bombed Person. He died the next year. So next time you think you're having a crappy week at work, yeah. Story 2. The Titanic had 2 sister ships, the Britannic and the Olympic. There was a woman called Violet Jessup, a nurse and a cruise liner stewardess that worked on all 3. The Olympic crashed into a warship whilst leaving harbor, but was able to make it back. She was on the Titanic as it sank and is referenced in the Titanic film, a stewardess that was told to set an example to the non-English-speaking passengers as the ship sank. She looked after a baby on Lifeboat 16 until being rescued by the Carpathia the next day. It's not known what exactly caused the sinking of the Britannic, but the lifeboats hit the water too early. As the ship sank, the rear listed up and a number of the lifeboats were sucked into the propellers. Violet had to jump out of the lifeboat she was in and sustained a serious head injury but survived. She was on board for all 3 incidents in the space of 5 years. She went back to continue to work at sea for another 30 years before retiring in 1950. She died of heart failure in 71. If you want to see a really wonderful video on Violet Jessup after finishing this one, I know she was featured on an episode of Puppet History. That show is amazing. I hope one day the professor does the history of a disembodied voice that fooled people into believing he was a real person who had way too many jobs. About a cool YouTube guy. Story 3. Bing Crosby advocated for salmon conservation in the North Atlantic against Denmark's overfishing in the early 1970s. The Danish government banned everything Bing Crosby in Denmark, but because he was so popular there, the Danish people protested the government, making them overturn the Bing Crosby law and even to enact salmon conservation legislation. Bing Crosby single-handedly managed to create a piece of Danish law. Edit. Did not expect this to get so big. Here is my evidence for the unconvinced. In 1971, CASE, the Committee on the Atlantic Salmon Emergency, enlisted the help of celebrities to publicize their efforts to convince the Danes to restrain their salmon fleet. One was Bing Crosby, who was part Danish. An enraged Danish government banned the sale of Crosby's records, only to discover that he was incredibly popular in Denmark. The move backfired and produced an outpouring of public support for both the crooner and the salmon. David R. Montgomery, King of Fish, The 1,000-Year Run of Salmon. Cambridge, Westview, 2003. Story 4. Google's DeepMind self-learning AI, AlphaZero, spent 4 hours learning chess and proceeded to beat the top chess engine in the world. The particularly interesting part is that it wins by playing in a very human way. Chess engines tend to run algorithms to assess a board after a move is chosen, looking at millions of moves every second, and decide who's better based on a set of parameters, making their play very direct. AlphaZero seemed to develop a far more human play style, somehow seeing something less quantifiable that led to an advantage in a position. Over the past 200 years, numerous chess masters studied a style of play similar to AlphaZero. This means that in 4 hours, AlphaZero developed a better understanding of the game than we could over the 1,000+ years it has been studied. Story 5. All 6 of the stars of Friends negotiated 2% syndication rights for the show. Friends still makes about $1 billion yearly through reruns, Hulu, etc. All 6 Friends collect a $20 million check annually. Yes, that means David Schwimmer still gets $20 million a year for doing nothing. So when you are alone in your one-bedroom apartment watching Friends and snickering how any of them are losers who haven't been famous since, there's a reason why. They don't have to work. Ever again. Look, if you give me $20 million just once, not even every year, I too would never work again. Seriously, I am pretty sure I could make that money last. $400,000 a year for the next 50 years? I think I'll manage. Story 6. Lobsters don't die of old age. Taking into consideration that humanity has only explored a small percentage of the ocean, there could very well be a big effing lobster just chilling out there. Edit. Apparently, the square cube law prevents super huge lobsters, but there are still some pretty big ones out there that we don't really get to see. I saw one on the internet that was 4 feet long, had 2-foot-long legs, and weighed 14 pounds. Still pretty cool. The Teotihuacan pyramids, known as the most architecturally significant Mesoamerican pyramids, were not built by the Aztecs. The Aztecs found it abandoned, settled there, and gave it its name. The origin of its founders are still a mystery. Edit. Apparently there's some recent theories regarding the Teotihuacan pyramids and why it was abandoned before being occupied by the Aztecs. The comments are enlightening. Sorry, I'm lazy. I would never ask our amazing editors to do any more work on these videos because they are already doing so much and I adore them. However, I will say if there was ever a time to show the meme of the History Channel guy that just says aliens, now would be that time. Story 8. Due to the way the speed of light works, combined with our current understanding of the expansion of the universe, there are areas of the universe that are both impossible for us to visit or even observe. The fabric of the universe expands faster over that distance than light can travel, so it never reaches us. Combine that with the bit where scientists currently think there's roughly a 4 times more star than exist in the Milky Way. Story 9. There was a time in history when trees existed, but the fungi which caused wood to rot had not yet evolved to digest wood. Dead trees and plants would pile up, and the 35% oxygen atmosphere caused massive fires. This is also the time where petrified wood came to be. Trees would sit in the mud for thousands of years and not rot, while minerals slowly replaced the wood structures. Story 10. Astronomer here. Always like that the coldest place we know of in the universe is on Earth. Even a dense dust cloud, aka coldest spots we know of, are a few degrees above absolute zero, the coldest temperature there is. In laboratories on Earth, however, it's quite common to get a few fractions of a degree above absolute zero for experiments. Ergo. Story 11. 700 million people, about 10% of the world's population, live on less than what $2 a day would buy you in the United States. If you earn more than $32,400 a year, you are in the top 1% of the world's income. That's after adjusting for local prices. A donation to the most effective charity on GiveWell means you will save one life for every negative $2,500 donated. Story 12. When NASA pitched the idea of the Voyager mission to Richard Nixon with the idea of touring the outer planets, he was told that the last time it was possible, Thomas Jefferson was in the White House. The particular planet alignment that Voyager 2 used on its journey occurs only once every 176 years. You won't hear it in the edit, but there was an embarrassingly long pause in there where I sat here thinking, they definitely did not have spaceships in Jefferson's time, so what the hell are they talking about? Story 13. If you choose not to have children, you are the first person in your direct ancestry all the way back to the first humans related to you to not have children. Edit. Changed bloodline to direct ancestry. Edit 2. Others have informed me that it goes far back as all organisms since life evolved on Earth. I hadn't thought of that. Story 14. As you get closer to black holes, time goes slower. This means that everything farther away would experience time faster and faster as you get closer and closer to the black hole. A second for you could be 1 billion years for those outside of it. Thus, if you fell into a black hole and looked outside, you would see the universe die with you. Story 15. That one about the world's population and income got posted twice, and with the way our scripts work, it would take me like 5 minutes to renumber the stories, so here's a fact about me that you can let sink in. I am 39, which means not only am I old enough that if I had a child the moment I became an adult, that child would be an adult and could have their own child. Meaning if I was really reckless and had a reckless kid, I could be a grandpa at 39, and that makes me feel ancient. Story 16. The moon orbits us from west to east, but we see it move across the sky east to west because of the rate of the Earth's rotation. Our observation is like being in a faster car watching a slower car heading in the same absolute direction fall further and further behind us. Story 17. Your computer is much more likely of contracting a virus by surfing legitimate church sites than by surfing adult entertainment sites. Adult sites generally have experts combating viral stuff, while church sites are maintained by low-tech volunteers as a rule. Story 18. Sharks are older than trees. Edit. Okay, sharks predate trees. The oldest shark fossils we know of are 420 to 450 million years old. The oldest known tree is Wataiza, about 385 million years old. Story 19. The city of Atlanta in Texas is closer to Atlanta, Georgia, a city 3.5 states away, than it is to El Paso, Texas. That is just how big Texas is. Also, Bristol, Tennessee is closer to Canada than it is to Memphis, Tennessee. Holy crap, I just checked this stuff out on a map, and this appears to be true, which is friggin' wild. Why is Tennessee so friggin' long? Story 20. Every subsequent year of your life makes up a smaller portion of it relative to your previous years of living. So at 1 year old, a year is 100% of your life. At 2, 50%, and so on. Maybe that's why time feels like it passes more quickly the older we get. Story 21. All the stuff you learn about in history class about civilizations rising up and dying out, about certain groups killing off other groups and taking over their lands, that is still happening right now. Story 22. Schizophrenia's hallucinations are shaped by culture. Americans with schizophrenia tend to have more paranoid and harsher voices/hallucinations. In India and Africa, people with schizophrenia tend to have more playful and positive voices. Story 23. The U.S. dropped 26,172 bombs last year, 2016. That's almost 72 per day. That's about 3 bombs an hour, every hour, for the entire year. In 2017, the U.S. has already dropped more bombs than that by September. Story 24. In 2010, about 300 people had as much wealth as the bottom 50% of humanity. It's estimated that as of January 2017, that number is now the same amount of people that can fit into an extra-large golf cart. 8. Story 25. Stegosaurus lived 150 million years ago. T-Rex lived 65 million years ago. Stegosaurus was more ancient to the T-Rex than the T-Rex is to us. I've heard this one a number of times, and it still blows my mind. No matter how many times I hear this, my brain still just imagines all the dinosaurs living together, but the fact that they were tens of millions of years between some of them seems absolutely wild. Story 26. About 1 million people die every year from mosquito bites. That's 2,700 per day or 100 every hour. Think about how many must have died since you started reading this prompt. Story 27. You don't remember being born or most of the first years of your existence. All you know is one day you just started existing and taking in experience/memories. Story 28. Adwaita, the longest living animal ever, was a giant tortoise given to Clive of India. He was born around 1750 and died in 2006. He existed longer than the United States has. Story 29. Neutron stars have such strong gravity that if you dropped a marshmallow into one, it would be like dropping a 3-megaton nuclear warhead on Earth. Story 30. If the sun were scaled down to the size of a white blood cell, the Milky Way galaxy would be the size of the continental United States. The vastness of space is mind-boggling. Story 31. It took humanity approximately 4 times longer to switch from copper swords to steel swords than it took to switch from steel swords to nuclear bombs. Facts about stretches of time are getting to be too much. I'm starting to question my brief period on this planet, and frankly, it is starting to upset me in some existential ways. Story 32. The UK Dyslexia Association is situated in Reading. Edit. Reading, Berkshire, UK, not the Pennsylvania one. Edit 2. The Reading postcode area. Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day. Story 33. After hitting the iceberg, it took 2 hours and 40 minutes for the Titanic to fully submerge underwater. Let that sink in. Story 34. 6,520,000,000,000,000 Earth volumes make up the same volume as the largest known star, UY Scuti. That's 652,000,000,000,000,000,000,000 times Earth. Story 35. Red, green, and yellow peppers are the same plant, just at different levels of ripeness. How is this not upsetting to everyone else? Story 36. An iPhone is more powerful than every computer NASA had combined in 1969 during the first lunar landing. That is amazing! And to think, if an iPhone is that powerful, just imagine how powerful an actually good smartphone is. iPhone owners, you've just been facted! Can that be a thing? Where I start more controversies in the comments that are just silly, instead of me getting a little hot-headed and saying something angry but poorly explained that I regret later? Let's say yes and move on. Story 37. If the Earth was the size of a marble, you would need several miles of space to build a scale model of the solar system. Story 38. Snipers are supposed to camp. Edit. So far, 2.1 thousand people agree with me. Edit. Make that 3.4 thousand. Holy crap. Speaking the truth helps. Story 39. Scientists haven't found out a particular brain component responsible for consciousness. There is no proof of consciousness. It just is. Story 40. The majority of the first American settlers only survived the first winter by eating their dead children. Story 41. In a few days, the contents of this thread will be reposted on BuzzFeed and YouTube as top 10 facts you didn't know. Uh-oh, they're on to us. Story 42. The United States hasn't minted any new Purple Heart medals since World War II. We've been using the stockpile that was prepared in anticipation of a ground invasion of Japan. Story 43. It is unlikely that a person could actually die in quicksand, since most quicksand is only a few inches deep. Story 44. France was still using the guillotine when the first Star Wars film came out. Story 45. To be in the top 1% of Americans in terms of income, you need to rake in about $400,000 a year, rounded off to $1,000 a day. Story 46. The Holy Roman Empire existed until 30 years after the United States was founded, 1776 to 1806. Good Lord, they're right. What is happening? Why isn't time what I think it is? What is anything? When is anything? Story 47. There are more tigers privately owned in Texas than tigers in the wild. Story 48. Macaulay Culkin is now older than Catherine O'Hara when she played his mom in Home Alone. Another fact for you, Macaulay Culkin's name is either Macaulay or Mr. Culkin, and neither sounds right. Probably why he goes by Mac. Story 49. In 2008, the subreddit r/jailbait was voted Subreddit of the Year in a Best of Reddit poll. Sure has come a long way. Story 50. There is on average a supernova explosion every 50 years in the Milky Way. On average, there are 30 every second in the observable universe. Story 51. Dozens of Americans die every day from slipping in the shower and hitting their heads. Dozens, I tell you. It's one of the primary leading causes of non-medical deaths in the USA. Story 52. Pineapples take 2 years to grow. Story 53. You can place all the planets of our solar system between Earth and the Moon and even have a bit of spare space after. Story 54. In the USA, more soldiers die from self-termination than in combat. Edit. Was half asleep and misread the title. Story 55. The U.S. federal government classifies fluffy white drug as a less serious, more useful drug than marijuana. I'm sick of just saying C and M for these drugs to avoid YouTube getting mad at me. From this point on, start expecting some really silly names for these really serious drugs that ruin lives. Oh man, I made myself feel bad. But not bad enough to not do it. Story 56. If you live in the USA, you have better odds of dating Taylor Swift than dying of bird flu and Ebola combined. Story 57. There are more pot dispensaries in Colorado than McDonald's, 7-Eleven, and Starbucks altogether. Story 58. Scientists who work with cockroaches often develop allergies towards cockroaches. At the same time, they also develop allergies to pre-ground coffee. Story 59. The first electric car was invented at the end of the 19th century and it went 65 miles per hour. Story 60. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump were all born within a 66-day stretch. Story 61. In the span of the last 3 Star Wars movies, the Cleveland Browns have won 1 game. I don't personally really care very much about sports, but that is amazing. Okay, I looked and there must have been 3 movies right by each other, as they had one year with 1 win and the next year with 0 wins, but there were more wins surrounding those years. Still pretty funny. Story 62. Your body consists of roughly a 1-to-1 ratio of bacteria to human cells. Story 63. China used more concrete in 3 years than the U.S. used in the entire 20th century. Story 64. Next to the U.S. Army, Disney World is the largest buyer and importer of explosives in the USA. Story 65. When you're building a house, a sink needs to go in before the rest of the kitchen. Story 66. The overwhelming majority of hands you've touched have had a D in them at one point. Story 67. Gary Newman is older than Gary Oldman by a little under 2 weeks. Story 68. Cleopatra was born closer to the moon landing than when the pyramids were built. Stop it with the time ones! I told you to stop messing with time. I can't handle it. Pretty soon you're gonna be like, JFK's pet was a woolly mammoth and beavers weren't discovered until 1973. Story 69. There was a period in time where 4 distinct species of human lived concurrently. Story 70. Since its discovery in 1930, Pluto has not yet made a full orbit of the Sun. Story 71. There's about 12 times more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way. Story 72. The man who invented the Frisbee was cremated and turned into a Frisbee. Story 73. When humans started farming, blue eyes in humans hadn't evolved yet. Story 74. Anne Frank and Martin Luther King Jr. were born in the same year. Story 75. If you have clean water and temperature control, you are better off than half the population. Story 76. The Great Pyramid was built before the last woolly mammoth died. Damn it! What? I swear I didn't look ahead! No! Story 77. The cigarette lighter was actually invented before the match. Story 78. Fanta started as a Coca-Cola substitute in 1940s Nazi Germany. Story 79. Next year there will be adult entertainment stars who were born in 2000. Story 80. The U.S. Navy has the second largest air force in the world. Story 81. Vending machines have killed more people than sharks. Story 82. We are closer to the year 2040 than the year 1994. Whoever wrote this, I will find you, and I will make you pay for making me think about that. Story 83. The entire continent of South America is east of Florida. Story 84. The Oxford University is actually older than the Aztecs. Story 85. Samuel L. Jackson turns 69 this edit Thursday. Further edit. Whenever I'm reading this, he's definitely older than that. Story 86. Cows kill more Americans than terrorists. Most years. Story 87. There are more chickens in America than people on the planet. Story 88. The overall goal in golf is to play less. Story 89. Maine is the closest U.S. state to Africa. We had this fact in another video, and someone in the comments was like, no, it isn't. Hey, folks, you know you're allowed to Google stuff before you comment, right? Just saying. Story 90. Gwen Stefani is older than Ted Cruz. Story 91. Betty White is older than sliced bread. Story 92. Sinks can't open doors. Let that sink in. Story 93. We can't prove we aren't in a simulation. Story 94. Stevie Wonder couldn't read music. Story 95. Your bones are wet. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.